everyone, welcome to another conversation with me regarding inner peace and security in the series Inner Peace and Security. So in this conversation, our focus is going to be new beginnings. How do we establish patterns that help us recognize the new beginnings that we have, and how do we also within that process open ourselves up to having and experiencing new beginnings. And as I mentioned before, the important thing is to ask yourself, what does a new beginning mean for me? What does that entail? And I always recommend that you look up these words in a dictionary if you don't know where to start. So looking up the word new, something that is undiscovered, something that is something that we're unaware of, that's new to us, a different perspective than what we're used to. So look up something that's untarnished, something that's pure, possibly. So look up that word, and then beginnings, starts. Beginnings can refer to as endings, in the sense that you're ending something in order to begin something new. So look that up and see what it means for you, and see how you've approached new beginnings in the past. See how they come into your life, and understand how you've taken advantage of them or not taken advantage of them. So far, we've in our discussion of how inner peace and security is related to new beginnings or vice versa, we have established that it's important to understand what those words mean to you, and how they've come up in your life, and how you handle that situation. Because when you are open to new beginnings or understand what they mean for you, because a new beginning can be positive or negative depending on your state of mind, so you have to be ready to accept that. And having a definition of what a new beginning is, what you're having as far as a foundation for expectations, I think is important. Like, you may have it can get difficult if you have an expectation of how you want the new beginning to go, in the sense that, well, I want this new beginning and I hope it's happy-go-lucky, or I hope it's X, Y, and Z. But if you have a foundation where you're coming from, like, in the past, my new beginnings have resulted in X, Y, and Z. In the past, I've handled my new beginnings in this way. So you kind of have a foundation as to how you handle your new beginnings. And this is something that allows you, or gives you, the opportunity to know when to take a risk, to know what a risk involves. Because I know, like, right now, it's really promoted to take a risk, jump off the cliff, do the next thing, do this, do that, take a risk. You never know. But, it's important to ask yourself, what are you jumping into? Where are you going in the situation, depending on who's promoting the risk, depending on where what area this risk involved. And sometimes there is a level of research or a level of foundation that we need in order to jump into that risk. Like, what are the pros and the cons? What are the trade-offs of jumping into this risk? What are some of the benefits, and possibly some of the things that can go wrong, or the consequences of jumping into a risk? So it's about understanding that new beginnings do have a level of risks within them, and what is your constitution to handle the consequences as well as the benefits of the risk. Because there are times where you take a risk, you have a new beginning, you take a risk, and you become extremely successful at it, and unfortunately, if you don't have the constitution, you may not be able to handle that risk really well. And or vice versa, you take a risk, it doesn't work out, and what are the consequences? What can I learn from this situation? Because I am a believer that even when we fail, it's not technically failing in the sense that we haven't learned anything. If you've learned something, I don't see that as a failure. I see that as an opportunity to have a new beginning, to take a different road, to go down a different path, however you want to lay out the words to describe that new beginning or different path. That is up to you. And it's, as I mentioned before, it's good to have a foundational energy to understand where you're coming from, to understand your constitution. And by constitution, I mean your makeup as a person. And that's why it's important to know who you are, what you're willing to do and unwilling to do. What are the trade-offs that you're willing to trade in order to have a new beginning, in order to assess the situation of whether a risk is going to be beneficial or not to you, because not every risk is beneficial. So doing this improves your chances of being successful, your chances of getting something beneficial to you, of having pleasure in the situation, of experiencing pleasure, of experiencing positive aspects of taking a risk, positive aspects of having a new beginning. And that's why it's so important to, again, know who you are. And, I chime or I beat this drum all the time, because I think I really believe that it's important to know who you are, and whether you're or not you have come at the end of the road of who you are, which I think we're always evolving and changing. So who we are changes to a certain extent, but there's a foundational energy that's always there that we can tap into, or at least tether to, ground to, when things are extremely chaotic, or when we are in a state and we're not quite sure of what's going on, which is the state of new beginnings. We never really know what's going on, but as I mentioned before, the foundation, this is something that you use to tether, will help you to continue to take those risks and have the best possible chance of being successful when you take those risks. And within those chances, right, you have the opportunity to change who you are. So when you take when you allow or open yourself up to new beginnings, there's a risk involved. There's also taking a chance, or there's also having to change in some ways. Like, this risk or this new beginning will probably change you. And we go back to having a foundational energy, because you want to have something to tether to, so that when these changes occur, you don't lose yourself in the change, because the change, the new beginning, the risk, that's a lot of chaos happening all at once. And so it's important to understand that we need something to tether to. And that's why I talk about having a foundational energy. I talk about you understanding who you are. And I know I keep repeating this, but I think it's really important that people understand this, because a lot of times we get lost in the pretty words or the pretty titles. I'm not thinking of the right word, or the pretty, like, one sentence kind of dude, just do it, or take the risk, jump off the cliff. If you don't, there's a word for it, but I can't think of it right now. But we get into that space where we're like really falling behind these one sentence kind of like life-changing things, and it's like, slow down, because you have to assess how you handle change. Slow down, because you have to assess, are you willing or ready to be in that space where you're in a lot of chaos? And by chaos, new beginning, change, taking a risk. That's a lot of things in the air that you don't know where it's going to land. So it's important to be able to ground yourself, or to bring order to a situation, so you can get the best benefits out of it. And we go back to that space of being able to receive benefits, being able to gain pleasure from having had that experience, from having taken that risk, from having understanding of how to take advantage of a new beginning, of having understanding of when to say no to a new beginning, because sometimes the new beginning is not right at that moment, and we need to reassess it at a later time when we feel ready to. So it's important not to be pushed into a new beginning. And I think when it comes to change, or even taking a risk, or even approaching a new beginning, it's important for you to be the orchestrator of that, or the magician of that, or it's for you to be the ones creating those situations where you have new beginnings and you're taking a risk. And what I mean by that is, there are times where you, like I said before, you'll read something from someone, and it'll be like, do this, do that, take a risk, right? As I mentioned before. And if you don't understand what that means for you, what happens is you can you're being motivated by someone else to take a risk versus you, all right, this is something that I am aware of. This is something that I've had some research, I've done some critical thinking about, and my heart and soul, or my mind and heart, tell me this is right for me. Even though I may not know how all the dominoes are going to fall or how everything is going to fall, I'm willing to take this risk. So this is you being the orchestrator or the architect of how you're going to jump into the risk, or when you're going to jump into a risk, versus somebody just pushing you off a cliff and saying you need to fly and you're not ready to fly. So again, about knowing yourself. And so when you get to that space of pleasure, when you get to that space of enjoying the risks, enjoying the rewards of taking a risk, how do you handle that? How do you get to that space of going through that gateway where you don't overwhelm yourself, or you don't get into a space where you lose yourself? Again, we go back to knowing who you are. We go back to understanding your foundation. So for example, we'll take entertainers because they're successful to a certain extent. We're aware of them because they're focused in the media, and we go to movies, we listen to music. So I'm going to use them as an example. Plenty of time, let's say I'm going to bring up Justin Bieber, right? Because I think he was discovered on YouTube. So he wanted something different, right? He got on YouTube and he was doing his thing. He took a risk. He got on YouTube, he's doing his thing, and change happens. He gets discovered and his world is turned upside down. He's introduced to a whole new aspect of what pleasure is, of what it feels like to be worshipped by people, what it feels like to really have an integral part in affecting people, in changing their moods, in changing their lifestyle. And that also has like a ricochet effect on him, because that's a lot of power to yield. That's a lot of expectations and information to take in. And my point is, when you get to that space of pleasure, and that space of pleasure doesn't mean that you are an entertainer or you're going to be an entertainer. That space of pleasure means you started at one place and now you're at a different place. And so you have to balance that. You have to understand how that works for you and how it can work against you having success, but you're not ready for it. So how does one manage that pleasure? For a lot of stars, sometimes they manage it through substance abuse, or sometimes they manage it through, sorry, my nose is itchy. So they manage it through I can't think of the word, but they become wild, right? And we see it because their lives are, we all have our wild moments, right? Our moments where we want to break out of order and just do whatever we want. But unfortunately for them, their whole lives are on TV, or really, we have access to it as the public, and they have very little privacy. And by they, meaning someone who's in the entertainment industry. Specifically, we're talking about Justin Bieber at this moment. So he's experiencing a level of pleasure, right? And he has to find out how to manage that level of pleasure, because this is not something he's used to. This is not something that's been part of his upcoming. Like, people who are used to it, like for example, the royals, they probably would react the same way to that level of pleasure, because this is a generational thing. They've been taught to be in the limelight. They've been taught to have, people worship them in a sense. But for an entertainer who's not into that space, this kind of pleasure can result in consequences. So that's why it's important to know who you are. And because I don't know Justin Bieber, I don't know his history, I'm going to stop there. But it's important to know what it is that you're made up of, or what it is that you have not necessarily know like tooth and nail. tooth and nails and stuff, like, I don't know if that's the right analogy, but not to know in like a very rigid sense, like you're unwilling to change, you're unwilling to adapt. But again, to have a foundation that's adjustable, but to know what you're tethering to, because when that level of pleasure comes, when that level of expectation comes, you're able to manage it. You're able to delegate what needs to be delegated. You're able to take those moments of solitude. You're able to be open, yet not allow the energies to take you over, not allow what other people are expecting of you to overwhelm you. And when your secrets are out there, right, you have to release a level of well, when you're in an entertainer or someone who is in that limelight, for specifically for entertainers, there's a level of yourself that's no longer secret. There's a level of yourself that can be hidden, and you have to be open. So you have to be able to manage that with new beginnings and going back to everyday life, right? So for an everyday person who's not an entertainer, right, whose accomplishments or whose desires are not to reach that level, let's say you get a new opportunity and you decide, you know what, I'm going to take this risk. I'm going to do this. I'm going to jump in head first. I'm going to soar. I'm going to do what I need to do, even though I don't know if the sky is always going to be clear. I don't know if the sky is going to be dark at some point. I'm open to the possibility that things may be up or down, right? So you take the risk. You say, I'm ready for this new beginning, and change starts to happen. And that change is something maybe you didn't account for. Maybe, it came out of left field, or it was like, whoa, I wanted to take this risk and I'm open to taking this risk, but I wasn't expecting this, right? And maybe that change is super pleasurable. Maybe that change is pleasurable, but has consequences, right? Has things that you weren't expecting, and now you have to release some of your own kind of ideas or your own expectations or some of the foundations that you've had in order to continue to be successful in this new endeavor, or in order to continue to gain pleasure for that. And this happens, or you understand what you need to do by knowing who you are, by understanding your foundation. And to maintain your inner peace and security, there's a willingness, or there's a part of you that has to understand who you are, that has to understand what you're willing to trade off for this level of success that you may be getting. All right, so let's wrap this whole thing together and reiterate what I'm saying, or what this message or conversation is talking about. So in this conversation, with regards to inner peace and security, when a new beginning approaches, it's important to know that you're taking a risk. It's important to understand that by taking that risk, you have a potential to improve your situation. And you have a potential to gain really great things from taking that risk. You have the potential, or you may need to release some things and allow for more things to come into your life, to release the things that may not be serving you, or to release thoughts of limited beliefs, to release the delusions or illusions about what's going on, to be focused in reality, in a sense, like to assess your current situation, the reality that you find yourself in within this new beginning, within your experience of pleasure, and see really what you're dealing with, to be open to what you're dealing with. Because sometimes, right, we don't want to see the truth of a situation. We put blinders on. So like, you take the risk, and sometimes it's more than you can handle. So you have to be able to say, yeah, this is more than I can handle. I need to walk away, or I need a moment to be for myself. I need to find my shade again. I need to, hide, or maybe hide is not the right word, but I need my solitude. I need to hover under the guise of the moon for a while, keep my secrets to myself, keep what's going on within me to myself, so I'm not attracting unwanted attention. So this is what this message is about, and I hope that it was helpful to you. I hope that you understand that sometimes when we have new beginnings, when we're taking risks, there are a lot of opportunities for change, and those opportunities can be really amazing, or sometimes they can be other things, but it's really up to you how you deal with that energy, how willing you are to introduce these things into your life, and how willing you are to change and to adapt and take advantage of new beginnings. All right, I will talk to you again at the end of the video. I will actually, now I'm going to post pictures of the earrings I'm wearing, close up, so you can see them, right? Because I also make jewelry, and the intro video that I introduced this series to has more information on the jewelry, what I think about it, and how I come to make it. And I'll show you the rings that I'm wearing and anything else that I feel is available at the time that I'm wearing, or it may not be available when you see this message, but if you do like it, definitely visit the website. And before I go, I have to tell you thank you for taking time to listen to this message. Thank you for taking time to connect with me. And if you want to continue to support this content, and it is me as well, because this is something that I feel like I do to give back to my collective consciousness, to give back to the community. And so like the video, share the video, and put the notification down so you know when I'm posting. And also, more importantly, besides just supporting me, this also helps the YouTube algorithm know that this is something of value and it should be shared. And so that's another way of doing it. And besides buying things from me, this is like the cheapest or the easiest way you can support my dreams, and I can help you without it having to be anything where we exchange money or anything like that. This is something that I want to do, and I'm putting my time out there. So I hope you find it helpful enough to support the content by, again, liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and putting your notification bells, and sharing the content if you really think it's helpful. And also, talk to me, leave me comments. If you think what I'm saying is not all up, to par with regards to your perspective, let's have a conversation. You can also reach me on my website, where you can leave me a comment and we can converse through email. Or if you want to bring it a step further and support me by, purchasing some jewelry, as I mentioned before, or purchasing some of the other things that I offer on my website, that's another way. And I would love to work with you if you decide to go on that path of a new beginning with me. Haha. Anyway, I will talk to you again. I love you. Take care of yourself.